The wind moaned through the pine trees like it carried voices from the past, but Martha was used to that. The sound no longer unsettled her. It was just part of the landscape now, like the creak of her old floorboards, the groan of the wood stove. Settling, or the lonely song of the night owl that came around each dusk. She had lived in that small, moss-covered cabin tucked deep in the Wyoming hills for nearly 10 years. Alone. By choice. Once, long ago, the house had been filled with laughter, music, and warmth. Her husband, James, had built it with his bare hands, hammering each board with a kind of quiet pride. He would hum while he worked, sometimes call her out to hold a beam or pass a tool. There were dreams drawn into the bones of that home. Cradle built too early. Names imagined but never spoken aloud. Then came the accident. One winter morning, James had gone to town, promising to return before the storm rolled in. He never made it back. A driver, too drunk to see the icy road, had veered into James's truck head-on. The crash had taken 2 lives, James's and the child Martha carried inside her. After that, Martha stopped going into town. The locals whispered behind her back, called her the ghost widow. She let them. It made it easier. They didn't knock, didn't pry, didn't try to draw her into church events or holiday gatherings, and she didn't ask them for anything. That was the silent agreement. Her life shrank down to predictable routines: chopping wood at dawn, boiling coffee in the dented pot, mending clothes by firelight. She planted a small garden in spring, canned vegetables in the fall, and patched the leaky roof every year herself. Days passed quietly, marked only by the turning of seasons and the faint creak of time. She didn't cry anymore. Not out loud. The grief had settled into her bones like old scar tissue, something she carried, but didn't touch. Then came the knock. It was dusk, and the sky was turning the color of rusted metal. Martha was sealing the windows against the oncoming wind, her fingers stiff from cold. The fire crackled behind her, throwing flickering shadows across the walls. 3 knocks. Not loud, but not hesitant either. She froze. No one ever came this far up the ridge, not in winter. Not without calling first. She crossed the room slowly, her heart beginning to thud with something between alarm and disbelief. She pulled curtain aside. A man stood on her porch, young, mid-20s maybe. He looked half frozen, his coat dusted with snow, face red with windburn. In his arms, bundled tightly in a blanket, was a baby. The child wasn't crying, just quiet. Still, Martha cracked the door but left the chain on. Her voice came out rusty. "Yes?" His voice trembled, either from cold or nerves. "Please," he said, meeting her eyes. "Can we stay one night?" "Just one night. The baby, she's sick. We've been walking for hours. I didn't know where else to go." Martha's instinct was to shut the door. Stranger, baby, cold night. None of it belonged to her anymore. But something about the way the baby nestled into the crook of his arm, the way the man's shoulders sagged like he carried more than weight, stopped her. "Please," he said again, his voice softer this time. "She needs warmth, that's all. Just one night." Martha hesitated. The fire behind her crackled louder now, like it too was waiting. And then, as if moved by a force she didn't fully understand, she unlatched the door. "Come in," she said quietly, stepping aside. The man passed through, the baby held close. The storm behind him rising, and just like that, after years of silence, the door to Martha's world opened. The warmth of the cabin hit him like a wave. Eli blinked as the fire's glow lit the creases of the old log walls. The room smelled faintly of cedar and dust. He stepped in slowly, still clutching the baby as if she were made of glass. Martha didn't speak right away. She closed the door behind him and locked it, more out of habit than distrust. Her eyes lingered on the snowflakes clinging to the stranger's collar, then dropped to the baby, her face pale, cheeks flushed with fever. She wasn't crying. That scared Martha more than anything. "Sit," she said, pointing toward the worn armchair by the fire. "Hold her close to the heat." Eli obeyed without a word, collapsing into the chair as if his legs could no longer carry him. The baby stirred, letting out a small whimper. Barely a sound. Martha moved into the kitchen corner without asking what they needed. She poured water into a kettle and set it on the stove. Her hands moved efficiently, reaching for a clean rag. Grabbing the old thermometer she kept in a jar. She didn't want to ask questions yet. The silence between them was fragile, like glass about to shatter. "She hasn't eaten since this morning," Eli said softly, eyes never leaving the child. "What's her name?" "Lena." Martha nodded, taking the thermometer and kneeling beside the chair. Eli hesitated, then shifted the baby so Martha could place the glass under her arm. Her fingers brushed the child's skin hot, too hot. "She's burning up," Martha muttered. Eli ran a hand through his damp hair. "I know. I didn't know where else to go. Where's her mother?" she asked, her voice flat. There was a long pause. "Too long. She's gone," Eli said at last. "Died last month." Martha looked up sharply, but his expression didn't change. She didn't believe that was the whole story, but she didn't press. Not yet. The kettle hissed, then began to whistle. Martha rose to her feet and poured the hot water into a bowl. She soaked the rag and brought it back, folding it carefully before laying it across Lena's forehead. "She needs real medicine and rest and food." "I'll leave in the morning," Eli said quickly, as if sensing her thoughts. "I wasn't trying to impose. I just ... She was shaking. "I saw the chimney smoke. I thought..." "You thought I'd say no?" He looked at her. "Honestly, I didn't know if I'd make it here at all." For a moment, the only sound was the fire snapping. Martha studied him under the flicker of light. He looked exhausted, more than that, haunted, like someone who hadn't slept in weeks, maybe months. His coat was too thin. His boots were worn through at the solace. "You walked here?" she asked. He nodded. "From where?" "East Ridge, over the back trail." Martha's brow furrowed. "That trail's been closed all winter. No one uses it anymore." "I didn't have a choice." Martha said nothing. She took a blanket from the back of the couch and draped it over both of them, the man and the baby. The weight of it seemed to calm Lena a little. Her breath grew steadier, her tiny hand gripping Eli's shirt collar. Martha stood for a long while staring at the pair of them. A stranger with a sick baby at her fire. Something that would have terrified her a year ago. But now, it stirred something unexpected, something painful, something human. "You can stay the night," she said at last. "But only the night." Eli nodded gratefully, his voice low. "Thank you, truly." Martha turned to head toward her own small room at the back of the cabin. But before she stepped away, she paused and glanced back. "If she worsens," she said, "you wake me." "I will." She disappeared into the dark hallway. But sleep would not come easy that night. Not for Martha, nor the man cradling the baby beside the fire, because something had changed. Something had entered the house beyond just wind and snow. The fire had burned low by midnight, casting long, shivering shadows across the floor. The cabin was quiet, except for the occasional crack of the wood settling and the faint, congested breathing of the baby wrapped tightly in Eli's arms. Martha sat at the edge of her bed in the back room, wide awake. She hadn't lit a lamp. She didn't need one. She knew the room by feel, the thin quilt, the shelf of old books collecting dust, the faint scent of cedar in the boards. And she knew the silence, too. She had lived in it for so long it had become a second skin. But tonight that silence was broken, just slightly, but enough to set her nerves on edge. Something didn't sit right. Not just the knock on her door. Not just the baby's fever, him. The stranger. Eli. She couldn't shake the image of the child's flushed face, or the way he had clutched her as if the world would take her at any moment. There had been real fear in his eyes, yes. But something else too, guilt maybe. Or grief. Martha stood and quietly moved down the short hallway, her bare feet soft on the wooden floor. The fire was nearly out, but a few glowing embers still pulsed beneath the logs. She approached slowly. Eli was dozing in the chair, his head tipped to the side. He looked younger and sleep-boyish even. But the lines on his face were deep, the kind worn by stress, not time. The baby Lena was curled against his chest, one tiny hand poking from the blanket. Martha gently touched her forehead, still warm but not burning like before. The wet cloth she had laid hours ago had fallen to the floor, now cold and useless. She picked it up and went to the kitchen to warm another. As she soaked the rag in warm water, she noticed something. His bag half open, sitting near the door. She didn't mean to snoop. It wasn't her nature. But her eyes caught something glinting. From inside, a small, silver bracelet, tiny, child-sized. She hesitated. Then she looked again and saw a folded photograph just beneath it, a woman, smiling, dark hair, holding the baby. Eli stood beside her, smiling too, but there was something distant in his expression even then. Martha quickly backed away, ashamed of herself. She returned to the fire and replaced the cloth on the baby's forehead. Eli stirred and blinked his eyes open. He looked at her, startled for a moment, then relaxed. "You're still up." "I never sleep well when I have strangers in my house," Martha replied, honest and blunt. Eli nodded. "Fair. You said the babies." "Mother passed." "She did. You were married?" Eli hesitated. "No." "Then who was she?" He looked away. The fire cast red shadows on his face. "She was someone who didn't deserve the life she ended up with," he said slowly. "I found her last month. She was hurt bad, said she didn't have long. Asked me to take Lena somewhere safe." Martha studied him. "And you were ... what? A friend?" "I knew her from a job I used to have. She didn't have anyone else. Neither did I." His voice cracked slightly. Whether from emotion or exhaustion, Martha couldn't tell. "And the people looking for you?" she asked. He met her gaze for a long, heavy moment. "I didn't steal Lena, if that's what you're asking," he said, not angry but tired. "But someone out there thinks I did. I'm just trying to keep her safe." Martha believed him, at least most of it. She still wasn't sure who he really was or where he came from, but she saw something raw and true in how he looked at the baby. Protective, fierce. "She need food tomorrow," Martha said, shifting the cloth again. "I'll find something soft for her to eat." "Thank you," Eli murmured. "I didn't expect kindness." Martha stood, pulling the blanket tighter around the baby. "I didn't expect company." She returned to her room, but the questions lingered in the air between them. Who was this man, really? Why had he chosen her cabin so far off the road? So hidden from the world? And how far behind were the people chasing him? By the time dawn crept through the frost-glazed windows, the storm had quieted. Snow coated the world outside in a blanket of untouched white. The forest hushed and still. Inside, the fire had burned down to soft embers, but the air in the cabin was warm. Peaceful, almost. Martha stood at the stove, stirring oatmeal in a dented pot, glancing over her shoulder every few minutes. On the couch behind her, Eli slept soundly, his head tipped back, mouth slightly open. The baby lay curled in a quilt beside him, cheeks flushed with returning color. Her tiny chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. The fever had broken just before dawn. Martha had woken to find the child no longer hot, her skin damp with sweat, her limbs relaxed. Relief unexpected and deep had flooded through her, loosening. Something in her chest she hadn't realized was still locked. She hadn't felt that kind of care in years. And it scared her. Eli stirred and sat up, groggy but alert the moment he looked at the baby. "She's cooler," he said, voice hoarse with sleep. "She's better." Martha confirmed. The fever broke around 5. Eli looked down at Lena, brushing a hand over her fine hair. "Thank God." Martha served the oatmeal without ceremony, setting 2 bowls down on the small wooden table. "It's plain, but warm." Eli joined her, the baby still wrapped up beside them on a folded blanket. He ate with the hunger of someone who hadn't had a full meal in days. Martha watched him between quiet spoonfuls. There was something in the way he moved, always aware, always cautious. Even as he ate, his eyes flicked to the windows, to the door, like he expected something or someone to burst through it. She spoke after a long silence. "The photo in your bag?" Eli froze, spoon midway to his mouth. "I wasn't snooping," she added. "It was open. I saw the bracelet." "And the picture." He set the spoon down slowly. "I figured you might see it." "Was that Lena's mother?" He nodded once. "Her name was Cora." Martha waited, but he didn't say more. She looked happy in the photo. She had her moments. Eli's voice was soft now, but distant. She was running from someone too, from something. "We met by accident. I was working a delivery job, back roads, quiet towns. She flagged me down, asked for help. I gave her food, offered to call someone. She refused. She was already pregnant by then." Martha's hands tightened around her bowl. This was more than she'd expected to hear. "She disappeared after that," Eli continued. "Months passed. Then she found me again, this time with Lena. She was bruised, weak. Told me someone was looking for the baby, someone dangerous. She didn't explain much, just asked me to keep her safe." "And you said yes?" "I didn't think," he admitted. "I just took the baby and ran. The next morning Cora was gone. I buried her outside a church 2 towns over." Martha absorbed his words in silence. "You don't know who the father is?" "No, I didn't ask. Cora seemed afraid of him." That was enough. They sat in stillness, save for the occasional pop of the fire. Martha looked at the baby again. She was sleeping peacefully now, her tiny hand clutching a piece of the blanket like it was her world. "You could have left her at a hospital," Martha said finally. "Or church steps. Why come here?" Eli's eyes met hers. "I didn't trust anyone. I didn't want her lost in some system. And this place, it's far, quiet. I didn't know who lived here, but the chimney was smoking. I thought ... maybe they'd have a heart." Martha said nothing. His words touched something buried. She'd once dreamed of being a mother. Her arms remembered the weight of a baby that never lived. "I'll be gone by nightfall," Eli added. Quickly, "I'm not trying to make this your problem." Martha looked out the window. Snow was falling again, light and quiet like ash. "Stay one more night," she said quietly. "Just until she's stronger." Eli blinked. "Are you sure?" "No," Martha said, "but she needs it. And I have no one to answer to." For the first time, Eli smiled, tired, grateful. "Thank you." Martha stood, collecting the bowls. "But I want the truth. All of it, before you go." Eli gave a slow nod. "Tomorrow," he said. But outside, deep in the trees, someone else was watching. The sun never broke fully through the clouds that day. It hovered dim behind the gray sky like an old lantern fading on the edge of dusk. A pale hush blanketed the woods, and the snow had fallen again, just enough to erase what came before. So Martha thought. She stepped outside that afternoon to chop firewood, bundled in her old coat, the axe handle cold in her gloved grip. Eli was inside with Lena, who had taken to resting against his chest with a trust that stirred something aching. And half forgotten in Martha, the wind cut sharp across the clearing as she walked toward the woodpile. She paused at the corner of the cabin. Then she saw them. Footprints. Her breath caught. Not hers. Not Eli's. Someone else. Half melted, but fresh enough to see. At least 2 sets heavy boots, one larger than the other. They circled the cabin once, then vanished into the tree line. Martha stood very still. She listened. The forest made no sound and no birds. No movement. Just the low murmur of wind brushing over snow-laden branches. She dropped the axe and moved quickly back inside, locking the door behind her. Eli looked up from the rocking chair, Lena asleep in his arms. "What is it?" "There were people here," she said simply. "Last night or early this morning. 2, maybe more." Eli was on his feet in an instant, placing Lena gently in the crib Martha had once stored in her attic, the one James had built with hands full of hope. "They found us," Eli said, pacing the small room. "You said no one knew you were coming." "Here. They didn't. I was careful." "But if they've been tracking me, they weren't just watching," Martha cut in. "They circled the house. That means they wanted to see who was inside." "Or what?" Eli grabbed his coat, then paused. "I should leave." "With the baby?" Martha said sharply. "In this weather? You won't make it past the ridge. I can't stay here and put you in danger." Martha stepped in front of him. "Where?" "Past that. If they're watching, then leaving now only leads them straight to you and her." Eli ran a hand through his hair, his voice low and tense. "They're not men who ask questions. If they come, if they think you're helping me, I don't care what they think." The firmness in her voice surprised even her. 10 years ago, she might have trembled at the thought of danger. But now, standing here, protecting this child who wasn't hers, and this man she barely knew, she felt something else. Purpose. She moved to the kitchen, pulling down a wooden box from a high shelf. Inside was an old revolver, James's, rusted, but functional. She checked the chamber. Still loaded. "You know how to use that?" Eli asked quietly. "I used to," she replied. "Enough." He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time since arriving. "You don't owe us this," he said. "I didn't open that door out of pity," Martha replied. "And I won't close it now." A long silence passed between them. Then Eli nodded. "I'll reinforce the back window," he said. "You board the kitchen one." They moved quickly, efficiently, strangers no longer, but co-defenders of something fragile and worth saving. Martha gave Eli the attic ladder and pointed to an old hunting lantern. They placed candles in dark corners, filled pots with water, loaded wood by the hearth. By dusk, the cabin had changed. No longer just a shelter, it was a shield. Martha took Lena into her arms that night, just for a moment. The baby blinked up at her with glassy, fever-dulled eyes, then curled softly into her shoulder. A tear slipped down Martha's cheek before she could stop it. Not from fear, from remembering what it felt like to hold a life one that depended on you completely. She whispered to Lena without meaning to, "I won't let them take you." Outside, in the darkness, something moved between the trees, and the cold grew deeper. The wind howled again that night, but it wasn't the storm that kept Martha awake. It was the silence between the gusts, the unnatural kind. The kind that made animals go still and instincts go sharp. Something was out there, watching, waiting. Inside the cabin, the flickering fire gave off just enough warmth to push back the chill. The baby, now tucked into the cradle with a hot water bottle and thick blankets, slept peacefully. Her fever had not returned, but tension had taken its place. Eli paced. He'd moved the small table in front of the door and kept James's revolver tucked in the back of his waistband. His sleeves were rolled, hands dirty from reinforcing the rear window with wood from the old shed. Martha sat by the fire, rubbing her arms. "Who are they?" she asked finally. Eli glanced at her. "They're not men you want to meet. You've said that. But you're here, and so is she, so I want the truth now, not shadows." Eli stopped pacing. The firelight danced in his tired eyes. Cora, Lena's mother, wasn't just running from an abusive partner. She was running from a man named Boone Keller. Martha's eyes narrowed. "That name means nothing to me." "It would if you ran with the wrong crowd," Eli said. "Boone runs trafficking routes, babies, women, anything that can be sold. Cora was one of his. She escaped pregnant. He never forgave her for it. She went into hiding. Changed towns, names, cut ties." Martha felt the chill settle deep in her spine. "And you?" "I was one of the drivers. Before I knew what was really happening, Cora trusted me. Told me everything when she came back. She begged me to take Lena, said Boone would never stop looking. I couldn't say no." He rubbed his hands together, eyes haunted. "I didn't think they'd track us this far." Martha stood, walked slowly to the window. The forest outside was motionless, blanketed in darkness. "You said Boone was a trafficker," she said. "Men like that don't send polite messengers." "They send hunters," Eli muttered. "Loyal ones, paid well to keep secrets buried." Martha turned from the window. "How many?" "I don't know. Could be one. Could be more." A long silence followed. Then she said, "We need help." Eli nodded. "But there's no phone. No signal. Nothing." "There's a ranger station 2 ridges south," she said. "Used to be manned all year, but now it's seasonal. Still has a landline, though." Eli looked at her. "It's 10 miles in deep snow." "I can make it," she said. "You'd freeze." Martha's eyes didn't waver. "I've lived here long enough to know every trail. I'll leave before sunrise, reach it by noon." Eli opened his mouth to argue, but saw something uncheckable in her face. Not recklessness. Resolve. "I should go instead." She shook her head. "You need to stay with her. She knows you. She trusts you." "And if they come while we're both gone?" The implication hung heavy between them. Martha walked over to the corner closet and pulled out her old gear parka, boots, and a fur-lined hat that hadn't seen the outside world in years. She began packing rations and matches, a flashlight, and an old flare gun from the days she used to hike alone. Eli helped her strap the pack tight. They didn't speak much. There was no need. The choice had been made. "Leave just before light," he said softly. "They'll be sleeping if they're nearby." She nodded. Then something rattled. A soft, metallic clink from the porch. Eli grabbed the revolver and moved toward the door. Martha peeked through the curtain. Nothing visible. Another clink. She stepped forward cautiously and slowly unlatched the door. On the porch sat a single item. The silver baby bracelet, the one Martha had seen in Eli's bag. It had been laid neatly in the center of the wooden step, but Eli hadn't gone outside. Martha's heart hammered. "They were here," she whispered. Eli knelt beside it. His jaw tightened. "They're not just watching anymore," he said. "They're letting us know they're close." Martha stared into the trees beyond. "We don't have until morning," she said. The woods, silent and black, seemed to lean closer around the cabin. They came just before dawn. Martha had barely shut her eyes when the sound of snow crunching outside yanked her upright in bed. This time it wasn't the wind or her imagination. It was footsteps, heavy, deliberate, closing in. She reached the fey wind or her imagination. It was footsteps, heavy, deliberate, closing in. Living room in seconds. Eli was already awake, crouched by the window, revolver in hand. The fire had been let to die out on purpose to keep the light low. Lena was bundled and sleeping, tucked into the corner behind a stack of firewood and 2 thick quilts. Eli looked at Martha and nodded once. They didn't speak. Then came the knock. Not frantic, not polite, Just 3 slow raps on the wooden door like they already knew the answer. Martha edged toward the back of the cabin, toward the kitchen window they hadn't yet sealed. She kept her shotgun low, breath shallow. A voice called through the door. Eli. "Walker, we know you're in there." It was male, steady, calm. "Too calm. We don't want trouble. Just give us what's ours and we'll go." Martha's stomach turned. The phrase "what's ours" rang like a blade through the room. Eli didn't answer. Another voice spoke now, different, closer to the window. "You're sheltering a stolen child," the second man said. "We have a legal order to retrieve her." "That's a lie," Eli whispered. Martha didn't need convincing. These weren't officers. No badges, no warning. Just veiled threats in the snow. She moved to the side window and peeked through a crack in the curtain. 2 men stood in the clearing, thick coats, beards, both armed. One with a rifle slung over his shoulder, the other holding something heavy in his gloved hand. They weren't here for a conversation. Martha turned to Eli. "We have to split their attention." He frowned. "What?" She gestured toward the rear door. "There's a narrow trail that loops behind the ridge. If you can get Lena out that way, I can hold them off here." "No," he said firmly. "I'm not leaving you here alone." "You're not leaving me. I'm staying behind for her." "Martha, look at me, Eli. I've lived alone for 10 years with no one to protect. Let me do this now." He looked at her like he was memorizing her face. Then, reluctantly, he nodded. She gave him the old flare gun, pressing it into his hand. "If you make it to the tree line, fire it. I'll stall until I see it." He picked up Lena gently, cradling her close. She stirred but didn't cry. Martha turned back to the door, loading 2 fresh shells into her shotgun. Another knock. Louder this time. "You've got 60 seconds, Walker." Eli slipped through the back quietly, vanishing into the trees with the baby wrapped in silence. Martha stepped into the center of the room and shouted through the door, "He's not here anymore." A pause. Then a mocking chuckle. "Lady, we're not stupid." "I'd rather be stupid than what you are," she shot back. There was movement outside, shuffling, muttering. Then the sound of someone stepping up onto the porch. Martha raised the shotgun. "Open the door," the first man ordered. "Take one more step, and I'll blow your kneecaps through your boots," she said coldly. They didn't know her. Didn't know that her aim, though rusty, had once put venison clean through the heart from 60 feet. The door handle jiggled. She fired once. Through the top panel, splinters exploded outward. A man screamed. Silence. Then running footsteps. And from behind the cabin a sudden crack. A red flare shot into the sky, glowing above the trees like a dying star. Martha's knees almost buckled with relief. They'd made it. The men outside must have seen it too, because seconds later, tires spun in the snow and a truck engine growled to life. Martha threw the door open in time to see the dark vehicle tearing through the snow-covered path, back down the ridge, leaving behind a trail of churned earth and smoke. She lowered the gun, heart pounding in her ears. They were retreating for now. But it wasn't over. Still, they hadn't gotten what they came for, and they'd know now the woman in the woods wasn't a ghost. She was fire. The sun rose slow and pale, casting a soft golden light over the snow-blanketed woods. Martha stood on her porch, wrapped in her old wool coat, eyes fixed on the trail where the truck had vanished just hours earlier. Her legs ached. Her arms trembled. But her heart burned steady. She had stood her ground. And she was no longer alone. The sound of footsteps returned, not threatening this time, but soft and familiar. Eli emerged from the trees with Lena asleep against his chest. The flare had done its job. They'd circled wide and waited until the danger had passed. Martha had never been so relieved to see someone in her life. "You're safe," she whispered. Stepping down to meet them, Eli nodded, his face shadowed by exhaustion and gratitude. Because of you. Martha gently took Lena into her arms. The baby stirred, yawned, and nestled against her like it was the most natural thing in the world. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled again, stronger now. Eli leaned against the hearth while Martha sat in the old rocker with Lena asleep on her chest. The quiet was no longer heavy, it was warm, like the hush after a storm. They'll come back, Eli finally said. I know. They'll come harder. I'll be ready. He looked at her, truly looked, and saw more than the solitary woman the town had whispered about for a decade. Why are you helping us, Martha? She looked down at Lena and smiled faintly. Because years ago, I prayed for someone to save me, and no one came. She paused, her voice thick. I don't think I ever stopped hoping someone would knock on my door. And we did, he said softly. You did, she echoed. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper, the legal documents he had stolen from the people chasing them. Martha read them slowly. They weren't just after Lena. They wanted Eli, too. Accusations, lies, power plays from a wealthy man who believed no one would protect the daughter he never wanted. You could disappear. You know, she said. Start over. I'd be risking your life, too. You already did, she said. Now let's finish it together. A plan began to take shape. Letters to a contact Eli trusted. Copies of the documents sent with a neighbor's mail sled. Quiet questions asked in town, careful but firm. Martha, once a ghost in her community, began to reappear. Not the way people expected, but stronger. One day, Sheriff Raymond rode up the hill, surprised to see smoke rising steadily from the chimney. Again, he was even more surprised to find Martha on the porch, baby in arms, and Eli splitting logs behind her. What's all this? The sheriff asked, eyeing Eli warily. Martha met his gaze evenly. This is my family. A pause. Raymond nodded, tipped his hat. Never thought I'd see the day. You still can't believe a woman might protect a man? She asked. One? Brow raised. He chuckled and shook his head. I just didn't expect the ghost widow to fight like a lion. She was always a lion, Eli muttered from the woodpile. Eventually, word reached the right people. The case was reopened. The men who had come in the night were caught in another town trying to flee with a stolen child. With proof in hand, Eli was cleared and legal custody of Lena was granted. But by then, no one needed a judge to say who Lena's real family was. Months passed. The cabin once again echoed with life-tiny laughter, clumsy steps, shared meals, and soft lullabies. Spring arrived, melting the snow and revealing green things beneath. Martha planted again for the first time in years. One afternoon, while watching Lena chase a chicken in the yard, Eli turned to Martha and said, We could leave, you know? Start fresh somewhere far. Martha shook her head. This is fresh. For the first time in a long time, I don't want to run. He smiled. Then I guess we stay. And they did, not as strangers. Not as ghosts, but as a family no one saw coming, forged not by blood, but by a knock on the door and a woman who answered it.